Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable Member Rino Terakatani. Tēnā koe, Rino.
Tēnā koe. Kororia hararuia kia iho o ngā mano, matua tama, wairua tapu mangānihira pono me te mangai, hei tautoko mai ai nei akine ai. Maungaharuru, Tangitu, Hapu, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, kua tau mai nei ki te whare pāre mata. Nō koutou tēnei rā, he rā whakahira tēnei. E ngā pau o te hāhi, tēnā koutou. Huri roa e rauranga tira mā e roto I tēnei whare, tēnā koutou, a tēnā tātou katoa. Mr Speaker, it is indeed an honour for me to speak at the final reading of this bill. And can I firstly acknowledge our manuhiri, Maungaharuru Tangitu, who have travelled from afar. I understand you had to get up very early this morning in the wee hours and have travelled all the way through to come down here to Pōneke. So I'd like to welcome you all. And I do want to give my acknowledgements at the start, sir, because there are so many people that have been part of this, to culmination that we are at this point, sir. And I do want to acknowledge the trust, and in particular Tanya Hopmans, Bevan Taylor, the negotiators, and the trustees, and I would just acknowledge all of whānau and our kaumātua and kuia who are here to witness this historic occasion and represent their whānau and their whānau that have gone before them, that have been on this long journey and taking their grievances and been fighting for recognition over many generations. And I do acknowledge you all for all your mahi and for coming here on this, at this historic time. And in particular, sir, I started off my speech today with a wee rātana inoi, because I do acknowledge the pou here, and Fred Reti and Hine Reti and the whānau. And I know your dad, the late Pōtoro, Joe Reti, played a significant role as the initial claimant for the Hapu. And so I do acknowledge your presence here today also. Sir, Maungaharuru Tangitu is a collection of hapu. They include Ngāti Kuru Mōkihi, Ngāti Tū, Ngāti Whakaari, Ngai Tauira, Ngai Ruruku ki Tāngoio, and Ngai Tahu, but not the one from that I'm part of. We may have a connection, I'm not sure. But sir, as has been mentioned in the contributions from Minister Sharples and my colleagues, there has been a terrible history that was inflicted upon this people, sir. And the trouble started back in 1851, and we know about the Crown and their modus operandi and the early settlement of our nation, how they went about purchasing large tracts of land at Ahuriri and Mohaka, and they failed to ensure that sufficient reserves were set aside for the hapu, and they weren't adequately consulted on any of the purchases, and also that included areas like Ahuriri and Te Whanganui Ārotu, which were never part of the deal. So, sir, there is a long history, and Maungaharuru Tangitu, they're not a familiar name in the history books, sir. You know, this hapu and its history seems to have been bypassed by the historians, by and large. Most Kiwis know about the history of our country and the land wars and Taranaki and Waikato, or maybe the pursuit of Te Kōti through Poverty Bay and Tūhoe lands in the Central Plateau. But not many have heard of Maungaharuru Tangitu and the hapu there, or their district, or the way that they were ill-treated by the Crown. But not today, sir. Today is their day, and today their history and their grievance is finally being recorded and being recognised by this House. And indeed it is a historic occasion. But I do acknowledge the historians in the House too that have Richard Boast and his work with this wonderful hapu over many years also. But not too many people have heard of Maungaharuru Tangitu, sir. But they do have a very particular mamae, because this hapu was the only hapu in the Kahungunu that suffered raupatu. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because that particular mamae was the way the lands at Omarunui and Pitani were attained. And a group of inland chiefs wrote to the Crown to say that they were travelling to Napier to negotiate the end of their participation in the New Zealand Wars, only to be stopped by colonial troops and given 24 hours to give up Omarunui. They never, and a battle ensued, and the chiefs were left to count the cost. 23 Māori killed, and around 80 exiled to the Chatham Islands, Wharekauti, Rekohu, where they were detained for 2 years without trial. And members of Maungaharuru Tangitu, who were part of that, they were also part of Te Koti's escape from Wharekauti, and when they returned, they found themselves in a fight not of their making, but they were just part of the rebellion. And it goes without saying, sir, that because of so-called rebels within the hapu, that was reason enough for the Crown to alienate 9,000 acres at Tangoio as raupatu land, and land taken as recompense for their disloyalty to the Crown. They then split the land into 12 blocks and gave title to individual Māori owners. We're familiar, as I've mentioned, with the tactics of the Crown in this situation, as it is a tactic that they've employed in many other settlements that we have spoken about in this House. And another way to pressure the hapu into selling the land was to forbid the owners from leasing to private owners. And this made the land less productive or valuable, and it played right into the hands of the Crown. And so the land could not be sold, but it went further. In 1909, there was more legislation that made it possible for individual owners to sell shares in the land to the government. And so by the 1930s, sir, by these actions of systematically purchasing the land, forcing the purchases of the land from these people, some 100,000 plus acres of land had been bought by the Crown, taken from these people. And the remainder of the hapu were left without an economic base or a presence in their takiwā. The only lands that they have left is 3 hectares where their marae is in Tangoio. So think about that. 110,000 acres down to a mere 3 acres. So it was a huge, huge loss inflicted. And as I say, it's the greatest land-grabbing machine, legal land-grabbing machine in the history of this country that the Crown created was the Native Land Court. And that systematically was a part of depriving these people of their whenua. And so I do want to talk about that landscape, that ancestral landscape of these people of Maungaharuru Tangitu, because it's that lovely stretch of coastal land mixed with foothills and a dividing range between Napier Airport north, along the coast past the mill at Whirinaki and onwards to Tangoio and its dramatic gorge, heading towards Lake Tutera. And nothing expresses this dramatic country of Maungaharuru Tangoio than driving from Napier to Taupo. The land is beautiful, sir, as it is dramatic, from the fertile Esk Valley and its row upon row of grapevines and its pretty little church, to the lakeside settlement of Tupohue, high up in the Maungaharuru range. Throw in some big rivers, such as the Mohaka, and you pretty much get a big idea of the geography that I'm talking about. It's this part of the country that the beneficiaries of Maungaharuru Tangitu whakapapatu, along with their relatives and whanaungas in Ngāti Pāhuera, it's mountain to the sea in all its ruggedness and glory. And the people that should be binding the land together, holding it together, the tangata whenua, they've been marginalised to Tangoio, and which is a very flood-prone area, sir. And so that is the beautiful ancestral landscape of these people, sir. And I'm delighted that we can be here to celebrate the passing of this bill. This marks a new chapter for the Hapu. I'm delighted to be able to mihi to you all and commend this bill to the House, because it certainly is a historic day. And I wish you all the very best for the future. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, a tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the